Hey, how you doing? Pretty cool that the Willowbrook science team's putting this together on this Earth Day, Wednesday, April 22nd, 2020, all during this crazy time with the Corona-19 pandemic and school being called off for the year. That between Mr. Keller and Mrs. Froman and Mr. Ryan's myself here putting this together for you guys. So we're going to show you some stuff in nature. That'll be pretty cool, and then we'll have some questions for you to answer. So I'll show you the first thing in just a second. All right, first up we have this Virginia bluebell just starting to come up in this little patch here. You can see these kind of purplish blue flowers starting to come up here. In just another couple days, these will actually have kind of a bell-shaped flower on them. And they're absolutely beautiful. So here's a whole patch of them. Virginia bluebells, a native wildflower in our area. All right, secondly, next up is gooseberry bushes. These have berries on them about the size of a big blueberry. I've actually made jam with them before, but you kind of have to prune them down to get the most berries out of them. These are growing wild, so they're a little more spindly, but you'll know gooseberry. They have leaves that look kind of like this in the woods. I don't know if you can see that there. And then they have all kinds of thorns on them, so when you go through them, they can shred you. I've gotten poked by them a lot of times because I have some that I've transplanted in around our yard, but can you see that against my thumb right there? These thorns, part of the gooseberry family, and it's a wild plant, but they do have berries on them that you can get later on in the summer. Pretty cool. Gooseberries. All right, the third plant I wanted to show you, it also hasn't quite come into flowering yet, but it's right here. Can you see where my hand is? It's called the prairie trillium. Trillium starts with TRI, prefix TRI for tri, meaning three. And there's three leaves on these, kind of a blotchy looking leaf between the green and light, the dark and the light green. All of these are, the flower is right about ready to come out right here. And the flower is a deep burgundy flower, and it kind of has three parts to it also. So this is known as the prairie trillium. They grow in little clumps like this because they're sending roots down. There's just a whole little colony right here of little tiny plants coming up. But the plant will grow about this high and then have a burgundy flower starting to come out of it, like this one right here starting to come. All right, this one's a surprise one. I hadn't thought of showing you guys, but it showed up here. This is called the May apple. And there's a little flower that's, I think the flower's up underneath it, but these are just starting to come up, also growing in a colony. There's some right here. See how these leaves kind of are down, kind of a greenish brown color to them. You can see more of the stem starting to come up through the top of them right here. But it's called the May apple. Some others growing over there. Here's one right here, hidden down in here, kind of a leaf that almost looks like a deer hoof, with cloven like that. All right, here's another one I hadn't planned on showing you, but very delicate little plant right here. And I don't know if you can see these white flowers. I'll try to come up kind of close to them. It's called Dutchman's breeches. They kind of look like a little pair of pants, if you upside down pair of pants there, but like these would be the leggings and that part right there would be the waist. So Dutchman's breeches, very soft little leaf down here. Okay, here's my last one. I saved my favorite for last. Look at this flower right here. Can you see that flower? It's white, looks like a star almost, has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 petals on it. It's called the trout lily. If you look at this right here. This looks like the markings on the back of like a brook trout. This mottled green and dark leaf, and from that leaf comes this pretty little flower right here, the trout lily. There's two trout lilies right next to each other with these really pretty leaves and that beautiful white flower. And if I turn it, you can maybe see the yellow inside of the pollen part. All right, so there you have it. A little bit of a review. We saw the Virginia bluebells. We saw the bush that was the gooseberry. We saw the trillium. We saw mayapple. We saw Dutchman's breeches, and lastly, one of my favorite, the trout lily. So hope you guys have a great Earth Day. Get out there, enjoy some fresh air, sunshine, maybe pick up some garbage along the way, and be thankful for the fact that we still are able to get outside and enjoy nature. Peace out. We love you. We'll see you along the way.
Here at Odonata Pond, which is the pond up on top of our prairie, and we're looking at horsetail. So it's all this stuff. This looks like a bunch of sticks. It's a very old plant. It was found in the fossil records about 270 million years ago, so it's been around since the dinosaurs. And it's a relative of the fern, and it's been windy today. But instead of making seeds like you normally would see a flower do, it makes a cone. And on the stem, the leaf part are those tiny little things at each joint. So these little things right here, where you see the black stripes, that's where the leaves are, and they're teeny tiny. So this is a plant, it likes to be near water, so it grows all along the edge of our pond. This is a plant called wild parsnip. It's just starting to come up right now, but it's going to end up being between 6 and 8 feet tall. Notice the leaves look kind of like celery leaves. This is a plant that you want to make sure you stay away from. If you touch it, it can make your skin really sensitive to the sun, and you'll get really big, painful blisters. So if you see something that's 6 to 8 feet tall with celery leaves, stay away. Here we have a big patch of invasive honeysuckle. They're just starting to get their leaves. Look at some flowers on them. Sometimes they're pink, sometimes there's more of a orange or white color to it. These are very invasive. They're taking over a lot of places, so then the native plants don't have room to grow. They do have pretty shallow roots, so if you see one, you can try and yank it out. This little plant is called bedstraw, and if you touch it, it's got kind of rough hairs on it. You can see how the leaves are all around in a circle on the stem, just like layers of circles. And what the pioneers used to use this for is to put in their mattresses to help keep the straw separated. So, because all those little coarse hairs on it kind of helped keep the straw from getting all matted down, so it kept their beds a little fluffier. And then right next to that we have something you want to stay away from. This is called stinging nettles, and if you touch this, it's going to sting you, and it's going to hurt for a while. You can get little welts from it too, depending on how badly you get it. So it will get taller, but that's one that you want to stay away from. This is a plant called bloodroot. The flowers come up before the leaves. So you can see that the flowers are a lot taller than the leaves are. And if you break off one of the leaves, you'll see why it's actually called bloodroot. Break this little guy off here. So I don't know if you can see, it's kind of a reddish sap. I'm trying to put some on this paper here so you can see. There we go. So the sap's kind of red, and the Native Americans actually use that sometimes to make dyes. Common blue violet, and you'll see that blooming first thing in the spring, one of the first things to bloom, and it likes to bloom in woodlands and like prairies and meadows.
Okay, so a few moments ago I actually saw a bluebird with nesting material on my property here, which was pretty exciting for me. There's one sitting on this birdhouse right now. It's a little blurry because a camera phone is not the best thing to get a close-up picture of birds with, but let's give it a shot. So this one looks like the male. It's got a much brighter blue back, pretty bright red Yep, the female just landed there now. Whoops. Female just landed there now. So one of the other boxes that I have on my property, not the one they're sitting on right now, has a few pieces of grass hanging out of it. And that's actually the one I saw the female bringing grass to this morning. But these birds in general, a long time ago, were like in the 60s and 70s. They were almost extinct. They didn't have any of the habitat that they needed to reproduce, meaning they didn't have a hole in a tree. So humans have kind of helped fix that situation, since we tend to like to cut down dead trees and cut down trees in general where there used to be woods, like along creeks, rivers, that kind of thing. But we made these birdhouses, and it's kind of really brought back this species from the brink of extinction. Now you can see bluebirds quite frequently. If you want to, you can always make a birdhouse. There's tons of plans online. It'd probably be a really good quarantine activity. But right now is kind of when they're starting to look to build their nests. So, oh, it's even got nesting material in its mouth right now. I don't know if you can see it on the video, but there was a few pieces of grass in its mouth too. So they didn't nest here last year. I had these boxes up for 2 years now. Glad to see bluebirds using them now. They landed on them last year, but they didn't nest, and they didn't have nesting material in their mouth. So I'm hopeful. I think I'll have a bluebird nest this year. Now I just got to keep the house sparrows out of them, which are an invasive species that kind of bullies a lot of critters that live in cavities. So I'll try to keep them out. You might be walking up to what looks like an ordinary pine tree, but when you take a closer look at the bark here, you can probably see this on some of your trees around your house. I've got them on my birch trees, my pine trees, just trees that make a lot of sap. You can see all these little tiny holes that are very regularly spaced. Like they're in columns, they're in rows. They're not just random holes all over the place. And then I see this sap that's actually running down, and if I go up a little higher, these ones must be fresh up here, because they're dripping out sap. This is not an insect. This is actually from a bird that I saw almost every time I came out of my house last year, or not last year, last week. This is a yellow-bellied sapsucker. So these sapsuckers are related to woodpeckers, and what they do is they peck into the tree in these little tiny holes, and what they're hoping to get is not the sap necessarily. They are hoping to get insects that are attracted to the sap, and then they will eat them and have a nice tasty meal. And the weird thing about all this is these sapsuckers don't actually spend their summer here or their winter here. They're just migrants. They just pass through. And it's a little weird to think that this many holes can be left, and it's worth it to peck this many holes in a tree when you're only here for a couple weeks. But I see these little holes even way up in the tree up there, and I see some even further up. The woodpeckers, these sapsuckers, were literally everywhere last week. I came out my door and like 3 of them flew away. I haven't seen quite as many this week as I did last week, but you never know, they might still be around. Favorite times of the year. Out here shortly after sunrise, and just the bird noises everywhere are almost louder than the interstate. Right here we have a red-winged blackbird. Very, very common bird. You'll see them. This is the male. The female looks completely different. But it's calling. You'll see them on roadsides, especially around wetter, grassy, cattaily areas. And they're trying to defend their territory, which can have a lot of the much more drab female birds quite a few of them nesting and having some of their next generation.